The city was waking slowly after a morning drizzle, the streets still slick with puddles and dirt. Papa Thomas sat on a worn wooden bench by the roadside, his old clothes faded and shoes frayed at the edges. He had just finished sweeping in front of a small shop, the broom's soft bristles brushing away the last bits of mud. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes were calm and thoughtful. Around him, the city bustled. Cars roared past, their tires splashing muddy water onto the sidewalks. People hurried by, some ignoring him completely, others throwing quick, indifferent glances. But Papa Thomas didn't mind. This was his place, his routine, a quiet connection to the life that seemed so distant from the mansion where his son lived. The black Range Rover sped down the narrow street without warning. With a careless splash, it drove right through a large puddle, sending a wave of muddy water flying through the air, straight onto Papa Thomas. He gasped, wiping his face with a shaking hand. His shirt, pants, and even his shoes were drenched in brown grime. "Hey, watch where you're driving," a woman shouted, but the car kept moving, slowing only a few meters ahead. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a sharp voice. "You shouldn't be sitting so close to the road, old man," the woman sneered. "This isn't your village." The window slammed shut, and the car sped off. Papa Thomas raised his hand slowly and said, "It's okay, let God judge." His voice was soft but steady. Nearby, people murmured, "Did she really say that? Such cruelty." But the old man remained silent, his eyes fixed on the road. Later that day, Papa Thomas returned to the grand mansion. The house stood tall and gleaming, a stark contrast to the muddy street outside. Inside, Bernard sat on a plush couch, engrossed in his tablet. When he saw his father enter, his brow furrowed. "Papa, what happened to your shirt? You look like you've had a rough day again." Papa Thomas smiled gently. "Bernard, I met a rude woman today." Bernard sighed and shook his head. "Papa, why do you keep going out there? You don't have to. We have everything here." Papa Thomas looked at his son with steady eyes. "Bernard, I won't stop until I find the right woman for you." Bernard dropped his tablet, frustration flashing across his face. "Papa, seriously, you're 36. You need a wife, someone who will build a life with you, not just enjoy your wealth." Bernard rubbed his forehead. "I have a girlfriend." Papa Thomas turned sharply. "You do?" "Yes, but I didn't tell you because I didn't want to rush things." Papa Thomas leaned forward. "Who is she? Where is she from? What does she do?" Bernard smiled faintly. "You'll meet her soon. She's beautiful." "Beauty isn't everything, son," Papa Thomas warned. Bernard hesitated. "She's proud, Papa. She looks down on people, wastes money on expensive things to show off. I thought I could change her." But Papa Thomas sat back, silent for a moment. "Does she respect you?" "Sometimes, and herself." Bernard didn't answer. Papa Thomas sighed. "I've watched women all my life. You need a woman who brings peace, not noise, who helps you grow, not wastes your efforts." Bernard nodded slowly. "Okay, Papa, I'll talk to her. Maybe she can come this weekend." Papa Thomas smiled softly. "Don't tell her anything special. I want to see her true self." Bernard chuckled. "You want to surprise her?" "No," said Papa Thomas calmly. "I want her to surprise herself." That evening, Papa Thomas returned to the streets, sitting quietly outside a supermarket, his clothes simple, a plastic bowl in front of him. People tossed coins now and then. Some didn't even look. He didn't beg, he simply watched. A black Range Rover screeched to a halt. Vanessa stepped out, sunglasses hiding her eyes, music booming from her car. She approached Papa Thomas, sneering. "You again," she snapped. "Why do you keep disgracing your generation?" He said nothing. "Look at your clothes, your face, you're useless. You're the reason this country is backward." She spat near his feet and turned. Before she could leave, a young woman with grocery bags stepped forward. "Enough," she said firmly. Vanessa turned, eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" "Someone with sense," the woman replied. Vanessa laughed. "Another poor rat trying to feel important. Insulting an old man for no reason isn't sense." Mary said sharply. "What did he do to you?" "He exists." Vanessa barked. Mary stepped forward. "He's old enough to be your father." So Vanessa scoffed. "Maybe, but at least he's not empty like you." Vanessa's face twisted. "Do you know who I am? My boyfriend is rich. I can ruin you in minutes." Mary smiled coldly. "You're loud, not rich in character. Jealousy with lipstick is nothing." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "You'll regret This, Mary replied calmly. One day, that same man you insulted will be the one you'll need to bow to. Vanessa stormed to her car, slamming the door. Mary turned to Papa Thomas. Sorry, sir, he smiled gently. Thank you, my daughter. Why do you stay out here like this? I sleep in an empty store at the edge of town, he said quietly. It's not much, but it keeps the rain away. Mary's eyes softened. Papa, studied agriculture. I'm a graduate, no job yet. My parents are poor farmers in the village. He nodded slowly. I want to help you start a small farm. Grow simple things, pepper, tomatoes, vegetables. You'll have food and some to sell. Papa Thomas looked surprised. You want to help me farm? Yes, Papa. I have nothing but strength. Better than waiting. He smiled faintly. You're too kind. No, Papa. Good people deserve help too. She looked into his eyes. He didn't say a word when that woman insulted you. Your silence told me everything. Papa Thomas chuckled softly. You're different. Try me, Mary said. He nodded slowly. I will think about it. Think fast, she teased. We can start with a basket of okra. Even that can change something. They laughed together, the warmth between them a quiet spark in the busy city. That night, Papa Thomas entered the mansion with a smile. Bernard looked up. Papa, I met someone today, the old man said. Bernard raised an eyebrow. Really? The most beautiful and respectful woman I've ever known. Bernard sat back, curious. She has a clean heart, dignity, and courage. Not makeup or fancy shoes, true beauty. Bernard was silent. Papa Thomas leaned forward. Your girlfriend can come tomorrow, but I want to meet Mary first. Bernard nodded slowly. Tomorrow will tell, Papa Thomas whispered. The next afternoon was dry and hot. The sun bore down on the concrete sidewalks, baking the dust into cracked layers. Papa Thomas sat once again near the supermarket, wearing his usual faded shirt and loose trousers, a plastic bowl resting at his feet. He hadn't eaten since morning, but his mind was elsewhere. He had barely slept the night before. Mary's voice still echoed. In his head, we can plant simple things. Pepper, tomatoes, vegetables. It was rare to meet someone like her. So young, yet not corrupted by the rush for wealth or status. She didn't know who he was, only what he seemed to be, and still, she had offered him something more precious than money, dignity. He closed his eyes and breathed slowly. Then, the familiar sound of a car engine ripped through the quiet. A black Range Rover screeched to a stop directly in front of him. The music inside was loud, vulgar, and careless. The door flung open, and heels clacked against the pavement. Vanessa She stepped out like a queen descending upon peasants, dressed in a designer two-piece outfit and dark glasses that hid her eyes but not her scowl. She noticed him instantly. Again she hissed. Papa Thomas opened his eyes slowly and looked up at her, silent. You dirty old man, she snapped. Why are you always here? You disgust me. Sitting like a statue, smelling like failure. Still, he said nothing. Vanessa stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. Why don't you just disappear? People like you, you're the reason this country is stuck in poverty. Then she spat. The saliva landed near his feet, and she turned to leave. That was when a sharp voice cut through the air. Excuse me. Vanessa turned around, annoyed. Mary was standing there, grocery bags in both hands, her expression calm but firm. What did you say to him? She asked. Walking forward, Vanessa scoffed. Who are you? His lawyer. Mary placed her bags on the floor. No, I'm a decent human being. Vanessa laughed bitterly. You look like him, poor, irrelevant, always talking about decency. You insulted him for no reason. He's in the way, just sitting here like a goat. No shame. He's old enough to be your father. Mary snapped. Vanessa's lips curled. He's not my father. Look at him, maybe he's yours. You both look like you grew up under a bridge. Mary didn't flinch. At least he has peace. You, with all your money, don't even have manners. The air shifted. Vanessa stepped forward. Do you know who I am? I don't care, Mary replied. You think being rich means being better. I can ruin your life in a second. Mary raised an eyebrow. Then do it. But before you try, ask yourself one thing. What do you see when you look in the mirror? A queen, or just a scared little girl hiding behind makeup and brand names? Vanessa's face hardened, her hands trembled. Then, without another word, she turned, stormed back into her car, slammed the door, and drove away. The silence afterward was deep. Mary turned to Papa Thomas. I'm sorry you had to go through that. He looked at her with gentle eyes. You stood up for me when you didn't have to. She smiled and sat beside him. I couldn't just walk away. You are different, he said softly. Maybe, she replied. But Papa, this can't go on. You don't belong here. He chuckled. Where do I belong then? Somewhere you're respected. Somewhere your wisdom is used, not wasted. They sat quietly for a moment, letting the tension settle. Finally, Mary said, I've been thinking. I meant what I said about farming. Papa. Thomas looked at her with curiosity. I spoke to someone I know. There's a small piece of land behind a store. It's not much, but it's a start. He tilted his head. You're serious? I am, she said. We could start this week. Okra, spinach, tomatoes, just simple crops. You won't have to beg. You'll grow your own food. He stared at her. Why would you do this for someone you barely know? Mary paused. Because I know what it feels like to have nothing, and I know how rare it is to find someone like you. He swallowed, emotions rising in his throat. You remind me of someone I once knew. She smiled. Is that a good thing? The best, he said. They began to talk, really talk, about her studies in agriculture, about how, despite graduating, she hadn't found work, about her parents, farmers in the village who had sacrificed everything for her education. She spoke with honesty and resilience, not pity. Papa Thomas listened with full attention, absorbing every word. She wasn't just kind, she was intelligent, strong, and grounded. Before she left, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small paper. This is the address of the land. Come tomorrow morning, if you're serious. He nodded, taking the paper gently. Mary. Yes, Papa. You've already planted something in me. She tilted her head. What's that? Hope. She smiled, picked up her bags, and walked away. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Bernard sat in the living room reviewing a contract. His phone buzzed, but he ignored it. The heavy wooden door creaked open. Papa. Bernard called without looking up. Papa Thomas entered slowly, cleaner than usual, but his expression was far away. You look thoughtful, Bernard observed. I am? What happened? Papa Thomas sat beside him. I met her again, Vanessa. He shook his head. Mary. Bernard leaned forward, interested. She stood up for me. Again, against Vanessa. What? Bernard frowned. Vanessa insulted you again. Papa Thomas nodded slowly, but Mary, she spoke with fire. Not loud, just honest. She made that girl walk away like a whipped dog. Bernard's eyes widened. There's more, his father continued. Mary wants to start a small farm with me. Bernard blinked. A what? A farm? Behind a store? Nothing big. She wants to grow okra, tomatoes, vegetables. Why would she do that? Papa Thomas smiled. Because she has a good heart. Bernard sat back, silent. His father added, Son, this is the kind of woman you need. Bernard exhaled slowly. Tomorrow, I'll meet her again. You're sure? I've never been more certain. Meanwhile, in a luxury condo across town, Vanessa poured herself a glass of wine. Her hands still trembled slightly from earlier. She had never been humiliated like that, especially not by some barefoot peasant girl. She paced the room, fuming. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. Sko, she said into the receiver. A deep male voice answered, Yes, I need a favor, something dirty. The sky was still bruised with hints of dawn when Bernard stepped into the garden behind the mansion. He had barely slept. The night silence had been loud with thoughts about his father, about Mary, and most of all, about Vanessa. Papa Thomas found him there, standing by the roses, lost in thought. You're up early, the old man said. Bernard turned, couldn't sleep. I understand, Papa Thomas said. He walked slowly toward his son, his hands clasped behind his back. I've seen the storm in your eyes lately. Bernard didn't respond at first. Then, finally, you said Mary stood up for you, twice, and Vanessa. Papa Thomas looked at him carefully. Twice, she spit on me. Not with her mouth alone, but with her pride. Bernard exhaled, sharply. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I needed to be sure you were ready to hear the truth. Bernard's jaw tightened. She pretended to care about me. About you. No, said Papa Thomas. She cared only about herself. When people believe they're above others, they eventually fall, and hard. Bernard nodded slowly. I want to meet Mary properly. Not just a chance hello. You will, Papa Thomas said with a knowing smile. Soon, That afternoon, Bernard drove himself, no assistant, no bodyguard, to the edge of the city where the old shops gave way to bare patches of land. He found Mary standing beside a narrow stretch of cleared earth, sleeves rolled up, sweat on her brow, hoe in hand. She looked radiant, not in the artificial glow of makeup or glamour, but in the honest glow of purpose. He stepped out of the car. Mary noticed him and smiled. "I thought rich men didn't like dirt." Bernard chuckled. "Turns out, I don't know what I like anymore." She extended a hand. "You came to farm." He took it. "I came to learn." They worked side by side in silence for a few moments. Bernard dug awkwardly. Mary corrected him gently, laughing with ease. The sun bore down, but it didn't feel oppressive. There was something freeing about it all. Finally, he asked, "Why do you help someone like Papa Thomas?" Mary paused, wiping her forehead with the back of her arm. "Because he reminded me of my father. Quiet, thoughtful, and invisible to most people." Bernard nodded. "Most would just walk past." "I can't walk past someone and pretend they don't exist," she said simply. "Besides, he didn't ask for anything. That told me everything." Bernard watched her, the way she moved, the way she spoke. Everything about her was rooted, grounded. "I wish I'd met you sooner," he said, almost without realizing. Mary smiled but didn't reply. She handed him a small basket of seeds. "Here, plant something. Let's see if your hands are as honest as your words." Back at the mansion, Vanessa sat on Bernard's couch, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone with disinterest. She had come uninvited, dressed in designer from head to toe, reeking of perfume and entitlement. Papa Thomas entered first. The moment she saw him, her eyes flickered, but she said nothing. Bernard walked in after. "Vanessa," he said coolly, "what are you doing here?" "I missed you," she replied sweetly, "and I thought it was time I had a proper dinner with my future father-in-law." Papa Thomas remained silent, his gaze sharp and steady. Bernard didn't smile. "You insulted my father twice." Her charm cracked. "I didn't know he was your father," she replied too quickly. "That's the problem," Bernard snapped. "You needed to know who he was before you treated him with decency." Vanessa stood. "So, what now? You're throwing me away because of some old man?" "No," said Bernard. "I'm walking away because I finally saw you for who you are." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Let me guess, it's about that peasant girl, isn't it? The one pretending to play farmer." Bernard didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than any accusation. Vanessa picked up her purse. "Fine, you'll regret this," she stormed, out of the house, but it wouldn't end there. That night, in a dimly lit room, Vanessa met with Sko. "I want him ruined," she said. "He embarrassed me." Sko leaned forward. "What are you asking me to do?" "I want you to plant drugs in his office, alert the police, get him arrested, destroy his name." Sko said nothing. "And the girl," she continued coldly, "I want her gone. Her and that old man. I don't want them anywhere near Bernard again." Sko's eyes narrowed. Vanessa tossed a thick envelope onto the table. "There's more where that came from." He picked it up slowly. "I'll get it done." But his expression betrayed nothing. Meanwhile, Mary walked home with a small basket of produce in one hand and a full heart in the other. She couldn't stop thinking about Bernard, his awkward hands in the dirt, the way he listened, really listened, when she spoke, and how he didn't look at her like a rich man pitying a poor girl. He looked at her like she mattered. When she got home, she told her parents, simply, "I met someone." Her mother smiled. "You look like you did." "I don't know what it is yet," Mary said, "but it feels ... safe." The next morning, Bernard received a visitor, a man in a dark jacket, rough hands, and quiet eyes. "Sko," he introduced himself. "I work for ... people." Bernard narrowed his eyes. "What do you want?" "I'm here to warn you. Vanessa paid me to ruin your life." Bernard stood abruptly. "What, she wanted drugs in your office? And worse, she wanted the girl, and your father ... gone." Bernard felt the blood drain from his face. "You did it." "No," Sko said firmly. "You helped my sister once, when no one else did. You gave her a job, paid for my mother's surgery. I never forgot." Bernard sat down slowly. Sko handed him a small recording device. "I got her voice, everything she said. I wanted you to hear it before anyone else." Bernard pressed play. Vanessa's voice crackled through the speaker, clear, cold, and unrepentant. By the time it ended, Bernard had tears in his eyes, not from pain, but from sheer disbelief. Sko stood. She thought she was buying silence, but I've learned that some debts are paid with truth. That afternoon, Papa Thomas found Bernard in the study, silent, staring out the window. She wanted to destroy everything. Bernard whispered, "Mary, you, my life." Papa Thomas nodded. "But now you know." Bernard looked up. "What do I do now?" His father smiled faintly. "You plant peace where someone tried to sow chaos." And Mary, Papa Thomas placed a hand on his shoulder. "Bring her home." Bernard stood in the quiet of his study, the recording device still warm in his palm. Vanessa's voice echoed again in his mind. The venom, the entitlement, the cold calculation. Plant the drugs, call the police, destroy him, and make sure that girl never wakes up. He had heard it all, and now he couldn't unhear it. Across the room, Papa Thomas watched his son with the calm of someone who had lived through too many storms. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and even. "Are you ready to expose her?" Bernard nodded slowly. "Yes, I don't care who she knows. She crossed a line no one should ever cross." Papa Thomas walked forward and placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "Then we will do this the right way. No revenge, no drama, just truth." Bernard met his father's eyes. "For Mary, for you, for peace." That afternoon, Bernard walked into the office of Detective Adebayo, a man known in the city for being incorruptible, which was why Bernard had helped fund his department years ago. Adebayo greeted him with a strong handshake. "Mr. Bernard, this is unexpected." Bernard placed the recorder gently on the desk. "Please listen." The detective leaned in and pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the office, threatening, confident, unmistakable. She detailed the entire plan without shame. Bernard watched Adebayo's expression shift from curiosity to controlled fury. When the recording ended, there was silence. Then the detective stood. "Give me 24 hours. Across town, Vanessa sipped on a cocktail at a rooftop lounge, laughing with two friends as they admired her new handbag. "So," one friend said, "what's happening with Bernard? Are we getting an invite soon?" Vanessa rolled her eyes. "That man is lucky to have me. He just doesn't know it yet." The second friend smirked. "You always land on top." Vanessa tilted her head back. "Because that's where I belong." She didn't notice the man 2 tables away, dressed in plain clothes, watching her carefully. The next morning, the police moved in. Vanessa was at a high-end spa when the officers arrived, crisp uniforms, silent authority. She was wrapped in a silk robe, cucumber slices over her eyes, when they tapped her shoulder. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped. "You are under arrest," one officer replied. "Charges, conspiracy to commit a felony, attempted murder, and criminal defamation." She laughed. "Are you serious?" Another officer pressed a button on a portable speaker. Vanessa's recorded voice filled the tiled spa room. Her friends gasped. One dropped her phone. Vanessa's smile collapsed. "You ... Can't use that," she stammered. "You planned it," the officer replied. "Now you'll answer for it." As they handcuffed her, cameras flashed from outside. News had already leaked. Reporters waited like vultures. The queen of cruelty was finally falling. Back at the mansion, Bernard sat with Mary in the garden, under the shade of the old mango tree. The sun filtered through the leaves in golden streaks. "She really said all that?" Mary asked quietly, still processing the news. Bernard nodded. "She wanted to destroy us. You, my father." Mary looked down, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what I did to deserve that much hate." "You showed kindness," Bernard said gently, and that made her feel exposed. Mary's eyes welled. "I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted to help someone. And that's exactly why I love you," he replied. She looked at him, surprised. "I don't want to wait anymore. Mary, I don't want to hesitate." Her breath caught. "I want you in my life, every day. Not as someone I admire from a distance, but as the woman I want to build with." Mary smiled, but tears spilled over. "Is that a proposal?" she whispered. He took her hands in his. "It's a promise." At the courthouse 2 days later, Vanessa stood trial. She wore a conservative black dress, her makeup subtle, her hair tied neatly. She tried to look remorseful, composed, reformed, but the court had heard the tape. They had seen the bank transfers, and they had listened to Sko's testimony. The judge, an older woman with piercing eyes, looked down at Vanessa with measured gravity. "You abused your influence," You plotted against innocent people. You mocked the poor, and when caught, you showed no true remorse, only fear of consequence. Vanessa wept. I was angry. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean you meant every word, the judge interrupted. This court finds you guilty on all counts. A wave of gasps swept through the room. Vanessa's knees buckled. 15 years in federal prison, the judge continued. No bail, no appeals. Her screams echoed long after the gavel struck. Back home, Bernard sat in the living room. As Mary came through the door, her eyes bright, her cheeks flushed from the sun. She held a small clay pot with a tiny okra plant inside. For your office, she said, smiling. Bernard took it gently. It's perfect. He motioned for her to sit beside him. Papa Thomas watched from a distance, quiet but deeply moved. Mary sat. Bernard leaned in. My father said something once. That peace is the one thing money can't buy. She nodded. And the one thing worth planting everywhere. He kissed her hand. Then stood. Come with me. To where? To the village. The dusty road twisted through green hills as Bernard's car arrived at Mary's parents' home. A modest mud brick house with a tin roof, surrounded by cassava plants and goats. Her mother came out first, wiping her hands on her wrapper. Her father followed, his back bent from years of labor, but his eyes still sharp. Bernard knelt. Sir Ma, I've come to ask for your daughter's hand, and to tell you, from this day forward, you are not forgotten. Mary's mother cried. Her father placed a shaking hand on Bernard's head. May you never lack peace. 3 weeks later, Bernard and Mary married in a small, beautiful ceremony in the family garden. No celebrities, no media, just those who mattered. Mary wore a simple white dress and walked barefoot on the grass. Papa Thomas gave a short, heartfelt speech that made everyone tear up. And as the sun set behind them, Bernard whispered in her ear, we started with dirt and okra seeds, and look where we are. She laughed, resting her head on his shoulder. We're just getting started. The light of the new day crept through the city like a soft whisper. The sky, blushing with a touch of gold and lavender, felt like a silent promise that today would be different. And it was. It was the day Bernard and Mary would marry. But long before the ceremony began, before the first guest arrived, or the first string of music played, something greater was already taking shape. 2 lives, 2 worlds, folding gently into one. The planning had begun with one word from Mary. Simple. I don't want cameras or glitz, she told Bernard. Weeks earlier, as they sat under the mango tree behind his father's house, I want joy, real joy. And joy, Bernard had said, is what I want to give you. He had already spoken to her parents, both of whom had wept at his sincerity. He had returned twice to their village, sitting on a low stool in the shade, eating roasted plantains with her father, listening to stories about soil, harvest, and survival. Mary watched him as he listened, not as a man pretending, but as a man humbling himself. Then came the second conversation. I don't want them in that village anymore, Bernard said one evening. They've worked enough. Mary hesitated. Papa won't leave his farm. He doesn't have to, Bernard said. We'll build a new one here, in the city. A proper one. Land, equipment, irrigation. They'll work if they want to, but only because they love it, not because they have no choice. Mary had cried quietly that night. She didn't cry often, but that night, the walls she had built to survive poverty, disappointment, delay, all crumbled under the weight of something she'd never felt so completely before. Being truly seen. 3 days before the wedding, Bernard's home transformed not into a palace, but into a garden. The large front yard, once reserved for expensive cars and stiff business meetings, now blossomed with colorful fabrics, woven chairs, baskets of fruit, and laughing children running barefoot on the lawn. Mama Ebel, Mary's mother, took over the kitchen. No chef touches this pot, she declared, wooden spoon in hand. My daughter's wedding, my food. Papa Thomas chuckled from his seat nearby. I believe you, he said, lifting his nose to the scent of boiling peppers. Don't sit there too long, she warned playfully, or you'll be grinding yams before lunch. They both laughed. Papa Thomas had laughed more in the last 2 weeks than he had in 2 years. On the morning of the wedding, Papa Thomas was the first to rise. He walked slowly to the back garden, breathing in the dew-soaked air. He stood beneath the mango tree and looked up. Thank you, he whispered, for this peace. He didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for long life. He asked for peace. And he had found it, not in marble floors or chandeliers, but in the gentle hands of a woman who planted seeds, and in the soul of a son who had finally learned to see. The ceremony began just after noon. There were no journalists, no red carpets, just friends, family, and neighbors. The aisle was made of palm leaves woven across soft grass. A small choir sang hymns under a white tent. Birds added their own music from the trees above. Mary walked out of the house in a white dress sewn by a tailor in her village. The fabric shimmered not with crystals, but with care. Her hair was braided down her back, adorned with tiny wildflowers. She wore no makeup, just a radiant calm that made the entire crowd forget to breathe for a moment. Bernard stood beneath the archway made of fresh bamboo and ivy. He wore a clean cream-colored kaftan, simple and elegant. When their eyes met, something passed between them, not nerves, not even passion, but deep, reverent stillness. The kind that only exists when two hearts recognize home in each other. Papa Thomas sat in the front row, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. His chest swelled as Mary reached Bernard, and the two stood hand in hand, facing the small priest. "My children," the priest began, "you came here today, not as rich and poor, not as powerful and powerless, but as two people who chose each other above pride, above ego, above fear." Mary's hands trembled slightly. Bernard steadied them. "Do you, Bernard, promise to never forget this moment? Not when storms come, not when others whisper, not when the world changes around." "You, I do," he said. "And do you, Mary, promise to stand beside him, to never forget that peace brought you here? Not wealth, not status, not luck, but peace." "I do," she whispered. "Then I bless this union," the priest said, "in the name of truth, humility, and love." They kissed, short, soft, sacred. After the vows, the dancing began. Bernard surprised everyone by joining the traditional dance with Mary's cousins, wearing a wrapper and moving awkwardly but joyfully. Mary laughed so hard she had to hold onto a chair. Later, under the sunset, Bernard found Papa Thomas sitting alone, watching the fading sky. "Papa," he said, taking the seat beside him. The old man didn't speak for a while. Then he said, "You look like a man who has finally arrived." Bernard smiled. "I feel like one." Papa Thomas nodded slowly. "When I was your age, I was chasing many things: land, money, attention. I thought that made me a man. And now, I know better. A man is someone who protects peace, who multiplies love, who builds what lasts beyond him." Bernard looked out at the garden, the laughter, the music, the shared meals. He nodded. "Then I want to be that kind of man." "You already are," Papa Thomas said, placing a hand over his. The next day, the newlyweds left for a quiet honeymoon by the ocean. They walked barefoot along the beach, the wind catching Mary's dress, the sea foam brushing their ankles. "I still don't believe all of this," she said softly. "It's real," Bernard replied, "and it's ours." They built sandcastles with children they didn't know, ate roasted fish by lantern light, slept to the sound of waves instead of traffic, and every night, before closing their eyes, they whispered one thing to each other: "Thank you." Back in the city, things changed. Bernard opened a new agricultural foundation in Mary's name, funding small farms across rural communities. He visited villages, no longer as a donor from afar, but as a son-in-law, a student, a man who understood. Mary worked beside him, quietly, consistently, never seeking praise, only purpose. And Papa Thomas, he never stopped sitting outside the supermarket, but now, he wore clean clothes and held no bowl. People still passed him by. Some still ignored him, but now and then, someone would stop a child, a student, a tired mother, and sit beside him, and he would say, gently, "Let me tell you a story," because the greatest wealth he ever had was wisdom. And now, finally, he was sharing it. If you watched until the end, comment the word peace, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends and family.